Can you guess who took this photo? Tokugawa Yoshinobu, who was the 15th and the last shogun of Japan. Today, I'm gonna dive deep into his career, not as a shogun, but as a photographer. In the time he lived, Japan was in the most drastic shift from a feudal Tokugawa shogunate to the modern empire of the Meiji government because of foreign diplomatic and military pressure we'd never had in the history of Japan. The major ideological political divide during this period was between the pro-imperial nationalists called Isshin Shishi and the shogunate forces. After 200 years of the isolation policy called Sakoku, the sense of national defense and nationalism were rising because of the impact of the West from Matthew C. Perry, who was an American naval officer. In 1837, Tokugawa Yoshinobu was born in Edo as the seventh son of Tokugawa Nariaki, who was daimyo of Mito. Even before he became shogun, he was interested in new cultures from the West, such as oil painting using new techniques and photography. Because of that, he was ridiculed as too westernized. Especially for photography, he didn't hesitate to be a model. There are two famous portraits of him taken in Kyoto before becoming the last shogun. In this photo, he is smoking a kiseru, which is a Japanese pipe. On his left, there's a book, Shijitsukan, which is a Chinese chronological history book. The shogunate had been facing the biggest problem they had ever had in history, so he might have been searching for a solution from the history of our sensei, China. In this photo, on his left, there's an American rifle, and on the other side, you can see his katana sword. I would say that this photo represents his conflict between a feudal shogunate and progressive Western culture, and that's a conflict the entire country had, not only him. These are the oldest photos of him. At that time, he was just a subject, but he's interested in new technologies, and you can easily imagine that he could shift from the one who got taken to the one who took later on. In 1866, Yoshinobu became the 15th and last Tokugawa shogunate after about 15 years of conflict between the shogunate and the pro-imperial Isshin Shishi. In 1867, just 1 year later he became the shogun, he decided to transfer power back to the emperor. That's the end of 265 years of the Tokugawa shogunate. To make this decision, he must have had a skill to see things objectively. We can see his potential to be a photographer from this action. Even after that, Tokugawa still had practical power in politics. And of course, the anti-shogunate forces didn't like that. Then, a civil war called the Boshin War happened between forces of the shogunate and the anti-shogunate coalition including Saigo Takamori and Katsu Kaishu. In 1869, the shogunate ended up getting defeated and Tokugawa lost all the power they had. Then he had no choice but to start a retirement life in Mito. That's the time he was getting into photography. After Tokugawa lost the power, he started to grab a camera because of his younger brother Tokugawa Akitake, who was taking photos before him. He learned photography from a Shizuoka-based photographer, Tokuda Koichi, and he took photos in Shizuoka oftenly with him. In Shizuoka, he mainly took landscapes around where he lived. He lived in Nishikusabuka, and there are rivers, temples, and shrines. He captured them. I would say that the photos themselves are quite simple, but I believe that in photography, sometimes, rather than what or how, who can be the most important factor. These were taken by the last shogun in Japan. That means everything. We are seeing the scenes that the shogun saw. I couldn't imagine how they felt when they saw a former shogun holding a camera. In 1897, he moved to Tokyo, which was not Edo anymore. There are some of his photos from Tokyo. This is Kaikōsha in Kudan in 1877, not long after the formation of the Imperial Japanese Army. It's founded as a meeting place for officers and as a reception hall. It's been through World War II, and now it's a non-profit organization of retired military servicemen and former commissioned officers of the Japanese self-defense. This is a tomb of the Byakutai, which was a group of teenage samurai of the Aizu clan who fought in the Boshin War on the side of the Tokugawa shogunate. When he took this photo, he must have been emotional. You can see a Western-style building, but people wear Japanese-style kimono, but some people wear Western-style hats. That will represent the shift between traditional style and Western style. And he was the one who made one of the biggest decisions to cause the shift. I imagine that when he was a part of the shogunate, he had a contradiction in his mind. As a member of the Tokugawa family, he had to fight the foreign power to keep the shogunate, but he was smart enough to know how big they were and try to accept their culture. Photography could be one of them. He left words. Lord Ieyasu established the shogunate to rule Japan, but I became the shogun to abolish the shogunate. He was visionary and had flexibility to accept new things even when he was a shogun. Those qualities must have been applied to his art. From his photos, you can see that he enjoyed his retirement life with photography. He'd been taking photos for 40 years, which was way longer than the time he was the shogun. How did he find Japan after the shogunate he ended?